We love stories about families that are getting back to families, back to home, and that's exactly what we see here. We've actually seen it several times in Genesis already. God leads Abraham around. He's got Isaac. He leads Jacob around. He's going to end up with Joseph in Egypt. The family ends up going to Egypt, and so they kind of bounce all over the place. But the entire time that they're bouncing, God promises them, I have a land for you. I have a place for you. I'm going to turn your family into a nation. I'm going to settle you in the land. I'm going to bless you in the land. And so over and over, we see this idea in Genesis about going home, about finding a home, that God is leading his people to find a home. This should speak to our hearts because every single person longs for home. Every single person longs to know that they can be in a place of peace, a place of rest, a place of comfort. We see that even in movies, we see this. When I was a small child, there was a movie about a group of friends trying to get back to family. It was called Brave Little Toaster. Now, 17 of you are like, I love that movie. The group of friends in this movie were household appliances, including the Brave Little Toaster. There was a vacuum, there was a lamp, there was an air conditioned window unit, but he was a bad guy. There's some other, and they were trying to get back home. Now I loved that movie when I was little. Now I got a little bit bigger. There was another movie about a group of friends who were trying to get to family, trying to get to home. This group of friends this movie was called Homeward Bound. I got a little more soft reaction. Homeward Bound is about two dogs and a cat. Remember, they get lost and they have to go through the mountains in order to get back to family, to get to them and to find home. Now, we know that movie wasn't based on real life because the cat would have sold the two dogs out in a second as soon as they were gone from the family. She would have found some way to off them, to get rid of them, and she'd have just been on the journey by herself. We also know it wasn't real because the animals talked in the movie, but that's beside the point. When I got a little bit bigger, there was another movie I loved about getting back home, back to family. That was called Back to the Future. In Back to the Future, Marty is in 1955 and he has to get back home. Now he's with his family in a situation that's even stranger than what we found in Genesis. So I won't get into that. But Marty's whole thing is to get back to his home. Over and over we see it in movies. This idea of getting to family, of getting back home. This longing to be with the people we love and the place we love. We see it over and over. Now, in this story, there's an obstacle. And the obstacle is a man named Laban, the father of the brides. That has nothing to do with that movie. Laban is manipulative, egotistical, selfish. He'll do whatever he can to get his way. He's already done this with his daughters in the marriage ceremony to Jacob, and he's done it with Jacob in Jacob's commitment to serve in Laban's house. But now in this story, the family has escaped. Laban is after them, and Laban is mad. But in the story, as we read it, Laban's heart is exposed for what it is. Now, before this, we've had some hints. We've seen some of the things that are going on with Laban's heart, some of the trouble, but we see it for exactly what it is in this story. His comfort is in his idolatry, and his idolatry is his downfall. And so from Jacob and from Laban, we see these two paths that people can walk in life. We would say that one is the path of idolatry. One is the person who pursues idols at all costs, pursues other smaller things in creation and places them in the seat of Creator God, and pursues after those and tries to find all their comfort in those. That's the path of idolatry. And then we see the path of following after God, the path of seeing the goodness of God and following him all the way home. And the question for us is, what path will we choose? If you have the sermon outline, which Landon already said, you can get it. You can do the touch to tap and get it. We put a video on Facebook this week of me testing out the touch to tap. So if you saw that video, just don't do what I did. Just do it a different way than I did because I was messing it up. But you can touch your phone in there, do the touch to tap, and you can get the sermon outline. Our passage in the sentence that's there on the sermon outline is this: we learn from Laban's story that idolatry leaves us empty-handed, and we learn from Jacob's story that God is faithful to his people and his plan. First thing I want us to see the irrationality in following the path of idolatry. The irrationality in following the path of idolatry. Let me give you a quick recap. If this is your first Sunday with us, or you got too caught up in whether the football crossed the plane of the end zone last night, whether it actually got over before he bobbled it, and whether a timeout was actually called, or whether it was actually just clapping, and maybe you've forgotten what's happened in Genesis. So let me give you a quick recap of some of the things that's happened over the last couple of weeks. If you go back a couple of chapters to Genesis 29, remember, Jacob is on the run from Esau. Esau has said that because Jacob stole his birthright blessing, Esau said, as soon as dad dies, I am going to kill Jacob. And so Jacob's like, I'm out of here. Jacob's mom says, pack your stuff, get out of here, you need to go. So Jacob goes, and he ends up far away at the house of a man named Laban. Before he gets there, he's at a well, and he sees a young lady as he is at the well, a young lady named Rachel. And he falls in love with Rachel. And he goes back with Rachel to her dad, Laban's house. And there he's at Laban's house. He's in a safe environment. He's far away from his raging brother Esau. And he's in love with Rachel. And he commits to serve Laban for 7 years in order to have Rachel as his wife. And in one of the most romantic sentences in all of literature across time, Shakespeare has nothing on this. No other writer has anything on this. He said, we are told that his 7 years seemed to him but a few days because he was so in love with Rachel. He had stars in his eyes. He had butterflies in his stomach. He had a shovel in his hand as he was slinging the poop over his shoulder or whatever he was doing for Laban. I'm not sure what he was doing. But those 7 years seemed to him as just a few days. But quickly, his dream turns into a nightmare because he thinks that he is going to marry Rachel, but he wakes up with Leah because of the trickery of Laban. He's committed now to serving 7 more years to have Rachel as his wife. His wives are mad at each other. They get mad at each other about who's having babies and who's not. He's trapped in a land that isn't his home. And so all of the sort of the dream scenario for Jacob falls apart. No longer is he in a safe environment. No longer is he just with the woman that he loves. All of a sudden now he is in the house of a manipulator in marriages that he didn't know he was going to get into. Maybe you can relate to this. Maybe you feel like you've been stuck in a job or in a relationship or some other situation where the dream is shattered. This is exactly what happened for Jacob. So in Genesis 31, Jacob finally decides to do something about it. 20 years after he got there, he decides it is time to go. So this is what we see. So if you're in chapter 31, in verse 13, Jacob tells Rachel and Leah that God appeared before him, and God said to him in verse 13, I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and made a vow to me. Now arise, go out from this land and return to the land of your kindred. So he says, he gets them, he pulls them aside, he says, honey, because there's 2, and he has 2 more honeys. He says, it's time to pack up your bags. We're going to go. The Lord has told us to leave. Their response, now remember, this is their house, this is their dad, this is the place they grew up in, probably the place that they thought they were going to spend their whole lives. But something has happened. They note that their dad has squandered all of their money, their inheritance, out of selfishness. They know that their dad has shown himself to be a person who doesn't put them as a priority. And so they basically say to Jacob, yes, absolutely, we will go with you. And of course, the most important thing here is that God told Jacob that it's time to go. Rachel and Leah have seen what God has done for him, and so they say yes. So Jacob loads up Rachel, he loads up Leah, he loads up the 2 maidservants, he loads up the 12 kids on camels, and they take off. If they had a minivan back then, the back window would have just had pictures of kids all across the back window, maybe a dinosaur chasing them. I always like those. So you got them, and so they take off from there. In verses 19 and 20, though, in our passage today, we are given 2 really important pieces of information. Look at verse 19 again. It says, Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel stole her father's household gods. And Jacob tricked Laban the Aramean by not telling him that he intended to flee. So a couple of important things. Your Bible, if you have a study Bible, then it might make a note there for where Jacob tricked Laban. Because in the Hebrew, it really says literally that Rachel stole the household gods, and in Hebrew, and it says basically Jacob stole the heart of Laban. That word for trick literally means in Hebrew to steal the heart of. And so Rachel steals the household gods, and Jacob steals the heart of Laban. He tricks Laban. So Jacob, when Laban has gone off to shear the sheep, Jacob says, all right, it's time to go. Shearing sheep was a pretty major task back then. It involved a number of helpers and traveling some distance from home. If you have any follow-up questions, I'm going to go ahead and tell you I have no further answers than that, but that's what I can give you. I had no time to go down the rabbit hole this week to find out why shearing sheep takes so long, but that's what happened. So he's gone away from them. Laban has gone away, and they say it's time to go. So Jacob basically tricks Laban. He gets his family together, and they take off. Before they leave, though, Rachel says, I have one final thing I need to do. She goes into Laban's room, and she steals his household gods. And so this is important in the story, and we are going to come back to that. So Laban, he ends up coming back. He finds out they've gone. At some point in the process, he finds out that they have stolen his household gods. In verse 22, it says, when it was told Laban on the third day that Jacob had fled, he took his kinsman with him and pursued him for 7 days and followed close after him into the hill country of Gilead. So he gathers his men. He takes off after them. And we know that he is in pursuit of these idols. The Bible talks a lot about idols. This is actually the first instance in the Bible where it's going to speak about idolatry. But of course, after this, if you know the Bible, then you know over and over and over, it will speak of idols. Idolatry would be all around the people of Israel. And unfortunately, later, it would end up being within the people of Israel. They would make idols for themselves. I saw a documentary on the History Channel a while back. And this archaeologist, who is sort of an Old Testament scholar, but he didn't actually believe in God or in the Old Testament. He really thought he was cooking. And he said this. He said, in archaeology, we have found in these excavations in Israel, we have found that the ancient people of Israel, we found these carved idols. The ancient people of Israel, in the Bible, it says they worship Yahweh God, but we've actually found that they carved idols for themselves. And so they actually worshiped other gods along with Yahweh God. He really thought he was making a point. I watched that and I thought, have you ever read the Bible? Yeah, they make idols for themselves. This is no surprise to anybody who's read the Old Testament. And in fact, it actually confirms the Old Testament. Yes, Israel themselves made idols. In Hebrew, in the Hebrew Bible, in the Old Testament, it warns us over and over and over about idolatry. Hebrew has 3 main words that it uses for idols. One of them literally means dung pellets. And so one of the words for idolatry, and that's exactly what it is, basically. In Hebrew, over and over and over, we get this warning about idols. And so here in this passage, you see the pursuit of idolatry. Now, of course, in the passage, I think Moses obviously is writing this to Israelites, and I think that they would have seen great humor in this. Let me just say this. If you can steal a god, it is probably not a god. If you can kidnap a god, if you can put it in your pocket, it is probably not truly a god. Now, in just a few minutes, we're going to see these idols are going to end up being desecrated, and I can't wait to get there. But all of this before this, the Israelites would have gotten a good chuckle. But that's the thing about idols. It can be real funny to us when we see somebody else's idols. Oh, look at them. Look how silly. Look how foolish they are. It can be a little less funny to us when it's our idols. When it's the things that we fashion out of creation. And we say, I'm going to give ultimate purpose. I'm going to give ultimate meaning. I am going to give my allegiance. I am going to chase after this thing. I'm going to chase after this person. I want to set my sights on this, and nothing will get in my way from the pursuit of this. One famous theologian said that the heart is an idol-making factory. If we are not following God, then we will be pursuing idols. We'll be building idols for ourselves. These little first priorities, these little ultimate meanings, these little wakes us up in the morning and gives us purpose. Laban is a picture of what it looks like when it plays out. Laban, who has basically already sacrificed his relationship with his daughters, who has sacrificed his relationship with his son-in-law, who is in the pursuit of his satisfaction, of his wealth, of at any cost, as long as it brings him comfort, him enjoyment. And now he is pursuing the idols because he believes that they will bring him blessing. And this is what happens anytime we make idols. Ultimately, it's not really even about the other thing itself. It's about us wanting everything for ourselves at any cost. This is what idolatry does. And we see Laban in the pursuit of it. So Laban and his men take off after Jacob. As one commentator puts it, you see there in verse 23, it says he took his kinsman with him and pursued him for 7 days and followed close after him into the hill country of Gilead. As one commentator writes in verse 23, that word pursued there in Hebrew is a military term. This is basically an act of war by Jacob, leaving, taking his family, and somebody stealing the household gods and taking them with them. This would have been like a small army going after a much smaller group of traders who had deserted them. And now think about this from Jacob's perspective for a second. He's now fleeing to the place that 20 years ago he had fled from, that he left because of the threat of death. And now he is returning to that place with the threat of death chasing after him. He's basically got enemies on every side. From a human perspective, if we were to see this just from purely like the ground eye view, we would say, well, Jacob might as well just figure out which death he would prefer. Are you going to prefer the death at the hands of Laban, or are you going to prefer the death at the hairy hands of Esau? Which one are you going to choose? And so Jacob is caught in the middle of them. But then something happens. Verse 24, it says, but God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream by night and said to him, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. The implication here is that God is telling Laban not to touch a hair on Jacob's head. So Laban finally gets to Jacob after about a week of chasing him. And when he finally gets to him, when he finally catches up to him, he goes off on him. His first question to him in verse 26 is, what have you done? This is really interesting because Jacob, the morning that he woke up with Leah instead of Rachel after his wedding, had a question for Laban. What have you done? And now Laban, the trickster who has been tricked, has that same question back to Jacob. He goes off on him. He says that he has things that he would like to do to him. Basically, you can see there in verse 26, what have you done that you have tricked me and driven away my daughters like captives of the sword? Why did you flee secretly and trick me and did not tell me, so that I might have sent you away with mirth and songs, with tambourine and lyre? And why did you not permit me to kiss my sons and my daughters farewell? Now you have done foolishly. It is in my power to do you harm. His little speech to Jacob here, we see it is basically equal parts self-righteous and hypocritical. The first thing that he says to Jacob is, why did you take my daughters as captives by the sword? This man is so out of touch with reality that he believes that Jacob is the one who has his daughters in prison and doesn't see that they were ready to get out of there with Jacob because of the treatment of Laban. Listen to me, this is what idolatry does. It gives us a skewed view of reality. It gives us a skewed view of priorities. It gives us a skewed view of the commitments that we should have in life. Laban had mistaken he had basically made other things his priority. Wealth is his priority. Selfishness is his priority. And the cost of that was his family. I love what he goes on to say. Laban, who has manipulated Jacob, who has basically kept him under his thumb for 20 years now, says, why didn't you let me know? I would have sent you off with a tambourine, with a procession, with harps. We'd have had balloons. We'd have had a public sheet cake. I'd have put the tablecloth on the table. It would have been so nice. The guy who would never let Jacob leave is now saying, I would have sent you off with a parade, basically. This is Laban. This is how pathetic this man is. This man who is probably greatly respected, probably esteemed by those in his community, whose things seem to go his way in life. He is now reduced to an unraveling, pathetic, and powerless shell of a man. And here's why he's powerless. Because God had appeared to him the night before and said, boy, don't you touch a hair on his head. He says, don't you say anything good or bad. But the implication of that is you better not do anything to Jacob. Laban now knows if he touches Jacob, he is in real trouble. And so all Laban has is these words. This is what he's been reduced to. He has no real authority. He has no real power in the situation. All he has is a bunch of words that he can throw at Jacob. But then he says something in verse 30 to Jacob that catches Jacob by surprise. He basically says, and why did you steal my household gods? Laban is in the pursuit of the household gods. So Jacob's reply to him in verse 31, he says, because I was afraid, for I thought that you would take your daughters from me by force. But then he's in verse 32, he says, anyone with whom you find your gods shall not live. In the presence of our kinsmen, point out what I have that is yours and take it. So basically, Jacob says back to Laban, if you find somebody in my camp who has your household gods, you have my permission, you have every right to take that person's life. The issue is that we know something that Jacob doesn't know. Jacob doesn't know that Rachel, his beloved, is the one who stole the household gods. And so Laban starts going through the tents, going from tent to tent, looking for his idols. And I need y'all to see how pathetic this is as it plays out. A guy here who is so concerned with his idols that he goes around basically hands and knees searching through every single tent. So it says he first goes to Jacob's tent, Leah's tent, then he goes to one of the maidservants, then he goes to the other maidservants. He's crawling around, he's looking for his idols all over the place, and then he finally comes to Rachel's tent. And here's where everything comes to a head, comes to this crucial scene. We know that Rachel has them. What happens if he finds them? Is he going to proceed to follow this oath that Jacob has made? Will he kill his own daughter? Will he try to kill Jacob? There's this tension in the air. But here we see Rachel out-trick the trickster. Rachel is sitting in her tent. The young lady who basically was hid away by her dad on her wedding night so that she couldn't go into Jacob's tent is now sitting in her tent as her dad is in there looking for his household idols. She's sitting on a camel saddle. The gods are under her. And she tells her dad, please forgive me. I can't get up because the way of women is with me. Basically meaning I can't get up because I'm in the middle of my cycle. Now, let me stop here. You might be wondering, why did Rachel steal the household gods? Why did she actually take them? We're not actually told the reason in this story why Rachel took the household gods. Now, there's a couple of possibilities. First possibility is that she wanted them to worship them. She wanted them for their blessing. She wanted to have them near to her so that she could reap the benefits of them. That is one possibility. Now, I'll tell you, I personally doubt that possibility. Because if Rachel believed in these gods, and she believed in their power and she believed in their blessing, she would not be sitting on them. She would not have them underneath her. The other possibility that it could be is that she is so mad at her father for how he has treated her for all those years that she decides in a rush of emotions to take what was the most valuable thing to him on her way out. And I think this is probably most likely. Basically, a farewell fist in the air to her father. These gods were supposed to bring fortune and blessing to the family, but Rachel saw what had happened because of his pursuit of idolatry. It had actually served to rip the family apart. Listen to me. No idolatry is ultimately done in secret. Eventually, it will be found out. Because whatever our highest priority is, whatever that thing or that person, that object is, we will chase after it. We will run after it, and the people around us will know that we are running after it. Laban is running after his idolatry. I believe that it makes Rachel so mad that she is trying to get back at him for it. Uh, Now, all right, so Rachel is sitting on the gods, and she tells her dad she can't get up because basically she's having her cycle. Now, there's something else we don't know in the story. We don't know if Rachel's telling the truth here. We don't know if she really can't get up because she really is going through her cycle right there, or we don't know if she's lying to her dad. Now, regardless of whether she is lying or telling the truth, the picture of what she tells her dad, combined with what we know about where the gods are located in this tent, is meant to show us the complete desecration of these little gods. What are these foolish little things that can actually be desecrated with somebody sitting on top of them? They can be made unclean. These little gods are the ones that can be made unclean. They have no power. They have no ability to change the situation. They have no real authority. And this is the problem with all idolatry. We might put a created thing in the place of our Creator. We might worship it by giving our allegiance to it and dedicating our lives to it, but it ultimately has no authority. It ultimately has no worth in the end. It can't give us what we are seeking. Don't be fooled by those like Laban who seem to be living good in their idolatry, because their destruction is coming. Here's what I urge you. If you are pursuing idols today, if you're pursuing idolatry, if you recognize idolatry in your own heart, throw it in the fire. If you have given something other than God ultimate meaning, run from it into the arms of God. God is the only one who can give you meaning that the idols promise but have no power to give. We see in Laban this foolishness of pursuing idols, and it ends up ripping his family apart. Laban is a picture of following idolatry, but Jacob is this picture, this story. In Jacob's story, we see the picture of God's goodness to those who follow him. I want to back up just for a minute and think about the story from Jacob's perspective. We've been following Jacob for several chapters now. We've seen that he is not a man who on his own pursues after the Lord. But what we have seen is that Jacob is a man who is pursued by the Lord. Jacob himself is not an initiator of any sort of great relationship with God, but over and over and over, we see that God is pursuing Jacob. I read an older commentary on Genesis 31 this week from a famous writer of a previous generation. It made me chuckle because he gets to Genesis 31 and he says, Jacob was a very honest, good man, a man of great devotion and integrity, yet he had more trouble and vexation than any of the patriarchs. When I read that, I thought, has that guy read Jacob's story? Jacob's an honest and good man. Jacob's not an honest and good man. Jacob is a man who we've talked about this. He is equal parts passive and manipulator. He is the guy who would manipulate other people to get his own way. But yet, what we see over and over and over is that God is pursuing Jacob because God is on mission. We see God's mission even in Jacob's story of getting back to home, back to his land. We see the story of God at work. So basically, God tells Jacob to get his stuff, get his family, and leave. Jacob says, you don't have to tell me twice. He gets his family all together. He loads up everything on camels, and he takes off. And through the land, if you were there in the land watching, you would see Jacob on a camel. You would see 4 camels with his 4 wives behind him. And you'd see 12 camels behind them with all the kids on them, just moving through back to home. Now remember, Moses is writing this for Israelites who are coming out of Egypt into the promised land, into the land that God has promised their ancestors. Jacob's kids end up being the leaders of the tribes of Israel. The tribes of Israel are named after the sons that Jacob has. And so as the people of Israel are reading this story, they're saying that's our ancestors who God moved from this place of exile and oppression, this hardship in life that Jacob was under. God moved them out from that, and God rescued them. He provided for them on their way into their homeland. So as Israel was reading this, coming out of Egypt, following this path that God has for them, and getting to their homeland, they would have said to themselves, the God who did it for Jacob is going to do it for us. The God who led Jacob is the God who is leading us. And church family, hear me say the same thing today. The God who led Jacob, the God who led Israel, is the same God with the same character who is leading us today. All through the Old Testament, you see this story of people that are looking for this home that God has for them, the place of God's rest, the place of God's comfort, the place of God's peace, the place where they can finally just exhale. You actually get a little glimpse of this in the book of 2 Samuel in chapter 8. So in chapter 8 of 2 Samuel, David has risen to power in the land, and basically, one by one, he is taking care of all of the threats that were around Israel at that time. All of the enemy's threats that were around them. Jacob would go to war. He would defeat this king, defeat this king, defeat this king, defeat this king. So he's defeating all of the kings until finally in 2 Samuel, chapter 8, verse 15, it says, "So David reigned over all Israel, and David administered justice and equity in all the land." Finally, peace. There's justice. It has finally come in the land. There is equity. It has finally come in the land. I love the very next chapter after this. That's at the end of chapter 8. Chapter 9, David's question is, he is administering justice and equity in the land. He says, does King Saul have any relatives that I can bless? And he's told, yeah, he's actually got a relative who is still alive, a little fella named Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth is a little crippled fella who kind of lives on the corners of society in fear that you're going to find him and kill him. And David says, bring him in. And he brings in Mephibosheth, and he says to Mephibosheth, I want you to live in the house. I'm going to take care of your needs, and I want you to dine at my table. David gives us this little picture. Home, rest, peace, and inviting those to dine at the table. Now, David has an issue. And the issue we come to find the next chapter. It says that one king died, his son rises to power in a different land, and he's like, well, I'm going to challenge David. And so he starts to go to war with David's people, and David and his people take care of him. But then in the next chapter after that, it says in the spring when the kings would go to battle, David stays behind. And when he stays behind, he looks out his window one night and sees Bathsheba. And the rest is history. You have sin that causes family strife, that causes national strife, and it ultimately leads to exile. And this is what you see over and over and over in the Bible, that God is saying, I will lead you home, I will lead you to rest, but yet sin gets in the way. God's plan, it works itself all the way to Jesus. Hebrews chapter 3 and 4. This is what it says about Jesus. It says that he is God's eternal rest for God's people. He is the one who will get us all the way home. Jesus is the one. If we are seeking rest anywhere outside of Jesus, we will never find it. Jesus is the one who brings us all the way home. This is why Jesus matters so much. He leaves his home to come for us. He prepares the house for us, and then he leads us all the way home. Let me say this to you. If you have spent your life chasing idols, pursuing them, lay them down, run into the arms of Jesus. We see what it looks like to follow in this path of God, the one that Jesus provides for us. So Jacob is following God, and we've seen already the providence of God on display. God appears to Laban the night before and says, don't you hurt him, don't you touch him. And so Laban knows he can do nothing to Jacob. Jacob is not safe by his own power. Jacob is safe by the providence of God. We also, in this passage, in the next verses, we see the justice of God on display. So basically, Laban searches through the tents. He doesn't find his idols. And in verse 36, it says, then Jacob became angry and berated Laban. Jacob said to Laban, what is my offense? What is my sin that you have hotly pursued me? For you have felt through all my goods. What have you found of all your household goods? Set it here before my kinsmen and your kinsmen, that they may decide between us two. These 20 years I've been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried, and I have not eaten the rams of your flocks. What was torn by wild beasts I did not bring to you. I bore the loss of it myself. From my hand you required it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. There I was. By day the heat consumed me, and the cold by night, and my sleep fled from my eyes. These 20 years I have been in your house. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flock. And you have changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been on my side, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. Can you imagine getting to tell an employer off? Like Jacob just told Laban off? If you're there for 20 years, under their thumb, they said, hey, you say, can I have off Friday? And they go, no, actually, I need you to come on Friday, and I need you to come on Saturday too. If you say, hey, I need some time for my family, and they go, nope, not right now. It's too busy at work. I mean, can you imagine how that would feel? Some of y'all, if you're being honest, you daydream about it. You daydream about the chance you're going to get on the day when you turn in your 2-week notice to be able to tell your boss everything that you have thought about them. Or maybe it's somebody else. Maybe it's somebody who used to be a friend. Maybe it's somebody who used to be close to you in life. Maybe it's somebody who is affecting somebody that is in your connect group. Listen to me though. It probably felt real good for Jacob to tell Laban off. For him, 20 years of just pent up frustration finally comes out. I love what he says to Laban. He starts it off. He goes, set all the household goods you have found right here. Let's judge who has what, because he knows Laban hasn't found anything. What he doesn't know is that Rachel actually did have the household gods, which is funny. I always wonder if years later, Rachel goes up to Jacob and she's like, hey, you remember that time your dad was my dad was looking for the household gods? I've got a funny story to tell you. Don't be mad at me, but I've got to tell you, I had them. So Jacob tells him that, and then Jacob just goes off on Laban. Listen to me though, Jacob going off on Laban is not the ultimate form of justice. God is the one who gets justice in this passage. The justice of God is what matters, because Jacob says, if the God of my father had not been on my side, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God saw my affliction. God is the one who sees. God is the one who knows. And ultimately, God is the one who judges. We see the providence of God. We see the justice of God in this passage. And then finally, we see the peace of God. It's interesting. So in verse 43, it says, then Laban answered and said to Jacob, the daughters are my daughters, the children are my children, the flocks are my flocks. All that you see is mine. But what can I do this day? For these my daughters are for their children whom they have borne. Come now, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me. So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. And Jacob said to his kinsmen, gather stones. And they took stones and made a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Laban called it Jagar Sahadutha, but Jacob called it Gilead. Laban said, the heap is a witness between you and me today. Therefore he named it Gilead and Mizpah, for he said, the Lord watch between you and me when we are out of one another's sight. If you oppress my daughters, or if you take wives beside my daughters, although no one is with us, see, God is witness between you and me. Then Laban said to Jacob, see this heap and the pillar which I have set between you and me? This heap is a witness, and this pillar is a witness that I will not pass over this heap to you, and you will not pass over this heap and this pillar to me to do harm. The God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us. So Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. And Jacob offered a sacrifice in the hill country and called his kinsmen to eat bread. They ate bread and spent the night in the hill country. Early in the morning, Laban arose and kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. Then Laban departed and returned home. So ultimately in this story, what they do, they end up setting up this pillar as a symbol for the covenant of peace. I won't pass over this pillar to your side. You don't pass over this pillar to my side. And as long as none of us makes trouble for the other, we will have peace between us. But ultimately, the peace that Jacob has here is the peace of God, because God is the one who is leading him all the way home. We're about to see over the next couple of chapters that Jacob has another obstacle that he's going to face. He has something else that is going to be in his way as he gets back home. And it's probably been in the back of his mind the whole time that he's been on this road trip. That he's coming out of exile and he's going home, but there's a brother who is waiting for him who he knew 20 years ago had committed to kill him. But for Jacob, what he can do now, as he is in the middle of it, is trust that the God who got him this far is the God who will take him all the way home. The same thing is true for us today. The God who is at work in our lives, the God who cares for us, the God who says, follow after me, the God who provides all the righteousness we need through Jesus will get us all the way home. There's not a proton, a neutron, an atom, an electron. There's nothing in all of existence that is outside of God's providence, that is outside of God's ability to care for that. And if God cares for all of creation in his general providence, how much more does he care for his children? How much more does he care for those who he sent Jesus, his son, to die for? So you might be in a spot in life where you're feeling the hardships because of somebody else's sin. Maybe you're feeling the hardships because of your own sin. This is why I like Jacob, because he's such a mix of the two. But yet what we see in this passage more than anything else is the character of God. We see the character of God on display for his people. So this morning, I urge you, don't follow the path of Laban. Don't follow the idolatry of Laban. This is a path that leads to destruction. Ultimately, Laban has to go back home empty-handed, and he's just done. His story is done in Genesis. But we know that's not the end of Laban's story, because one day Laban had to stand before God, and he had to give an account of his life before God. And ultimately, Laban's path probably ended in his eternal destruction, away from God in eternal hell. That's the path of idolatry. That's where it leads. Don't follow that path. It is only for your destruction. Follow the path of God, the path of Jesus, the path that leads to rest, to security, to peace, to home. We're going to have ministers standing down front in just a moment. I'm going to pray for us, and I'm going to invite you to respond to God. Maybe you've been convicted by this passage this morning that you have idols in your heart. You've been pursuing things that aren't of God. You have accidentally made some aspect, some object in creation. You have given it the place of God. You have given it ultimate priority. I'm going to invite you this morning to throw those idols away. Run hard after God. Pursue God, the God who loves you and the God who first pursues you. We'll have ministers down front. If you have never made a decision to follow Jesus, I pray that today is the day. Our ministers can tell you how to do that. But I'm going to invite, even right where you stand, as you respond in song, as you respond by singing, to respond in your own heart by laying down your idols and trusting God. Let's pray together. Father, I thank you so much for this passage that shows that our good Father cares for us. He calls us, he equips us, he leads us, he guides us. That you are the one who pursues us. You are the one who will take us all the way home. Father, we thank you for Jesus. We thank you that he is our eternal rest, that he is our eternal home, that he is the one who came for us, who died on the cross for us, who will get us all the way home. So, Father, I pray that we are not taking rest, not taking comfort in any idolatry today, that if there's anything that gives us ultimate meaning, ultimate purpose, ultimate hope, aside from you, that we lay it aside, that we run after you, that we trust in you because you are the God who cares for his people. So, Father, I pray that you will help us to truly respond now, not just with our voices, but in our hearts. We love you, and it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.